Good evening. My name is Kirill Pandey, Director of National Office. Welcome to our session with the County Executive on opportunities of budget. So thank you for attending this session. Special thanks to the Six Advisory Board, Officer, Significant Budget Strategy, for the county department took your time There's a couple of board in the coming. Well, I don't know that. Please, and be aware of exits right to your left. That means is forward of sides. I encourage you to watch this so that we can continue. We can with you to our newsletters and other channels with the county. And again, thank you for coming. And at this time, I would like to chair East County Citizens Advisory Board, Peter Riokin from the State Council.
I guess I really don't need to. I really don't need to say anything. I've done it, but anyway, my name is Peter Riokin. I'm chair of the East County Citizens Advisory Board, and I welcome you to this forum to discuss the capital budget. What I'm going to do now is just bring up Julie Knight, who's the fiscal and policy analyst from the Office of Management and Budget, and she'll basically walk through the slides and sort of work this thing up before she brings market. So.
My pleasure to participate in tonight's forum on the Montgomery County FY25 capital budget, FY25 to FY30 capital improvements program. Tonight, I will highlight a few basic points about Montgomery County's capital budget. I'll also share additional information about how you can give feedback on the budget and participate in the budget development. You'll then hear from the county executive about the fiscal outlook and have the opportunity for questions and comments. You will then also be able to participate in breakout discussions with our Montgomery County community partners and agency representatives, after which we will reconvene to report out and adjourn. This evening's presentation is the first of several community discussions that the county executive is hosting throughout the county during the month of April as one of the many ways for the diverse of the community of Montgomery County to have a full share in the capital budget development process. A virtual discussion will also be hosted on May 1st via Microsoft Teams. Your participation and engagement throughout the entire budget development process is both welcomed and appreciated. The county executive and the Citizens Advisory Board greatly appreciate you joining us. So some basics about Montgomery County's capital budget. Montgomery County has two separate distinct budgets that are related. The operating budget primarily covers things such as services and programs, education, public safety, and social services. The county's capital budget, which we are here to talk about tonight, primarily focuses on investments in facilities and infrastructure. Capital projects include construction and maintenance of buildings where the county's programs and services are delivered. These include schools, libraries, recreation centers, police stations, and fire stations. Infrastructure investments also include maintenance costs for the county's streets, roads, and bridges, and the county's information technology infrastructure. The Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, covers capital improvements that have long-term usefulness, things like libraries, buildings, sidewalks, and require large expenditures that are usually programmed over multiple years and result in a durable capital asset. These improvements are typically supported by the issuance of debt called general obligation bonds that the county pays back over a 20-year period, similar to the mortgage on your house or a car loan. These buildings and facilities are programmed in a 6-year plan because they take time to plan, design, and implement. New projects are typically added in the last 2 years where there is the most capacity or funding available to cover these expenses. The county operates on a biennial or once every 2 years capital improvements program. In biennial CIP years, amendments are limited to project changes that meet the CIP amendment criteria. In full CIP years, which is what we are preparing for now, changes to all capital projects are considered. Your feedback on the capital budget during this time is key to ensure that to all extent possible, your input is included in the budget proposals that the county executive will be reviewing. The county's capital budget includes 2 major types of capital development projects. Standalone projects are single projects that aid in the addition or improvements of a county asset, such as a new library or a recreation center. The cost of these types of projects includes several phases: facility planning, architectural design, the acquisition of land if needed, construction, and other costs and expenses needed to complete the project. During the facility planning phase, you may not see individual projects in the budget. Once planning is completed and the project progresses to the design phase, you will see a project description form and details for the project in the capital budget. Level of effort projects, on the other hand, are smaller projects do not require such extensive planning and design. These include mostly infrastructure maintenance projects that stay active indefinitely. An example of a level of effort project would be a sidewalk repair or a road repavement or the planned replacement of playground equipment, where the county reserves a certain amount of money every year during the 6-year period, and the department will allocate the money based on the prioritization of projects. OMB is working to create a list of all of the county's capital program 6-year expenditures, FY23 to FY28 by department, apart from the Water Suburban Sanitary Commission. The largest portion of the $5.3 billion budget is allocated to education and is shown here in the dark green and also to the blue that's left of the dark green. Allocations to Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College are 40% of the total budget, and to address their facility capacity. In dark gray is 31% that supports transportation projects throughout the county, which of course covers bridges, roads, transit, bikeways, sidewalks, etc. That leaves only about 30% to fund all of the capital projects to support those programs throughout the county. How is the capital budget funded? Of the $5.3 billion in the current capital improvements program, the largest majority, 32.7%, is funded with general obligation or GO bonds. GO bonds are municipal bonds that are backed by the credit and taxing power of the county. These bonds are issued with the belief that the county will be able to repay its debt obligation through taxation or revenue from projects. It's critical to ensure that the county does not take on too much debt. To that end, the county council annually adopts spending affordability guidelines for the capital budget. These guidelines provide for the total amount of general obligation debt issued by the county that may be planned for expenditure in the subsequent 2 fiscal years and for the 6-year CIP. Montgomery County has done a superb job prioritizing financial sustainability and being good stewards of county resources. The county maintains its status as a top-rated issuer of municipal securities and has the highest credit ratings possible for a local government. In fact, Montgomery County is one of only 14 AAA rated counties in the nation with a population greater than 1 million. The second largest revenue contributor to the capital budget at 25.5% is intergovernmental revenues, which is primarily aid from the state of Maryland, followed by recordation tax at about 14%. Recordation tax is an excise tax that is collected by the county when a home sales transaction takes place and the mortgages are recorded. Recordation tax is therefore strongly tied to home pricing. So big housing market fluctuations have a significant impact on the county's recordation tax revenue, and the county could struggle based on the pressures of the housing market. Impact taxes are about 4%, and they used to be a bigger source of funding before the growth policy changes reduced the fees that developers pay to cover costs of new schools and roads needed as a result of building more homes and businesses. Here you will see listed the county executive's priorities for the capital budget and capital improvements program. These areas, particularly school construction, climate change, affordable housing, economic development, and transportation, are focus points for the county executive and areas where efforts will be made to draw resources as budget decisions are made. Which is again why we emphasize your participation and input. Your county leadership genuinely desires your engagement in this budget development process. As such, there are many ways for you to participate. You can register for and participate in county council public hearings. You can also write a letter or send emails to your county leaders. You may also call MC 311 to report any needed infrastructure repairs in the community. We also realize and appreciate that our Montgomery County community is largely interested in resources for public schools, and it's important to understand that the county's CIP and MCPS's CIP are connected but separate. The MCPS school board controls the adoption and transmission of their recommended capital budget to the county executive. The county executive assesses how much the county can afford to contribute to MCPS, which is a major driver of our capital budget program. It will recommend certain level of funding, but does not make recommendations on individuals' specific projects. Therefore, the best way to impact MCPS, as well as Montgomery College, Parks, and WSSC water budgets, is to reach out to those prospective boards to express your priorities, ask questions, and advocate. And we also encourage you to do this as soon as possible so that your feedback may be considered and incorporated as these boards are making their requests to the county executive and to the county council. The points of contact for MCPS, Montgomery College, and Parks are provided here. As we move forward in the full CIP process, your input is explored this spring so that the departments can consider it and include it in their fall submissions. In September, departments will submit their budget request to OMB, and we will begin our internal review of their submissions. The county executive will begin his examination of budget submissions as early as October through late December, and the recommended budget is transferred to council January 15th so that they can make their determinations and approve the budget at the end of May. In fiscal year 23, the county began incorporating racial equity analysis through the implementation of a budget equity tool designed to help departments consider how projects are impacting racial equity outcomes. This tool is used by departments as they develop the scope of their project request. Incorporating this tool has proved helpful in making capital budget decisions. For example, projects that are serving racially diverse communities were easily identifiable by the county executive when forced to make project deferrals or reductions as a result of revenue downturns. He was therefore able to work diligently to hold these projects harmless to the greatest extent possible. The county's open budget website is an excellent resource to further understand both the operating budget and the capital budget. In the capital budget section, maps are available to see where capital projects are in your community and throughout the county. You may also find the county executive's recommended budget and the approved budget in the public budget publication section of the website. If anyone has technical questions, please feel free to reach out to the Office of Management and Budget's Capital Budget Management team. Thank you for your attention. I would now like to invite our county executive to the podium.
Thank you. So how's everybody tonight? It's okay. So I'm going to kind of set a physical context for the capital budget. And, so I wind up talking a lot about operating because those two are intimately tied to each other. And is there a way to stop this thing from screwing at me? Okay, so I'm still up. It's not driving you crazy. It's just the sense. Okay. I'm going to try to endure this. You don't hear about it. Is it irritating you too? So. Think it's off? No. One. This is why I use Apple. Can't speak for Google, but that's got it. Excellent. Okay. This is a different setup than we've done before, so we're all learning. So let me just start talking about how the capital and operating budgets are related. FY23, more than $126 million in cash from the operating budget supports the capital budget. So you all pay taxes, and the taxes you pay go into an undistinguished fund that can be used for capital or operating. We do a lot of funding of our capital projects with bonds, but we also put cash into our projects. And so this budget shows $126 million in cash. That to think of it one way, that's $126 million that could have been used to fund services or reduce taxes, but it's used here to build things in the county. The cost to operate new expanded facilities is included in this, and debt services included in this. And this is sort of like the big breakdown of where money goes in Montgomery County. And as you can see, the dark blue half of that circle is MCPS in Montgomery College. Debt service is the light blue piece, which is a pretty sizable chunk. And debt service is what we pay to pay for the schools that we build. And during Ike's term as executive for those 12 years, when interest rates were astoundingly low, when you could borrow money for 2% or less, we spent a lot of money building schools and meeting needs in the county, fire stations that had never been built, rec centers that had never been built. So yes, we have debt, but the debt came at really decent interest rates. And if we postponed it, the projects would have become more expensive because of inflation. So you wind up paying for it either way. But I thought the decisions to build schools in this county were really important to build the facilities that have not been done before. Go back to that slide, but done the picture. The rest of the budget is the $1.2 billion piece. OPEB and pensions eat up $156 million a year. Our pensions are fully funded, right? Okay. Our pensions are fully funded. Yeah. And so we're in good shape in our pensions. Included in here is the OPEB payment, which is a payment for retired employee benefits, healthcare. And this to me is the sore spot in the budget, but there's $800 million there that you've put there and our employees have put there. It is being used for nothing. And in the charter, it says it's supposed to be used for part of the health benefit payment, not for the entirety, because it would evaporate, in a matter of years. We have not used any of it to pay any of the healthcare payments. So you're paying taxes every year to pay retiree benefits directly, and we're not using any of this money, which I've tried to convince the council to tap into in some kind of systematic way. But that's one source of money that we could tap into if we were so inclined. The other part is PAYGO. You see that in the capital budget. We put in about 10% of what we're bonding goes in the form of PAYGO. There's about $33 million in that. But that's the shape of the budget. If you took what's called the rest of the budget and you backed out fire and police, you're backing out almost, I think, $700 million between the two. So you can picture not much left for libraries, for recreation, for transportation, or anything else. So this fire and police and corrections are a huge chunk out of that $1.2 billion. Next. This shows tax-supported debt service, and you can kind of see what happened in around FY09, which is where that chart begins, and you see the slope is a steeper slope than the last 5 years since because we have not done the same. We've not been able to put as much money into capital projects. In my last year on the council, we were spending $340 million a year on capital projects. We could build a lot of schools. We could build rec centers. We could do transportation. Since then, the council's lowered the targets to the point that the average over this 6-year CIP is $280 million a year. So if we had stayed at 340 rather than going down to 280, we'd be doing a lot more things that you're probably going to ask us to do later tonight. 6 years of $60 million is $360 million that we're not spending on things that we used to spend on things. So if we tell you we can't do everything, that's part of the reason we're not. Next. This shows the general obligation bonds that were issued. So you can see that this includes things that aren't schools. But you can see where we've been. We peaked at about, I'd say 325, 500 was an anomaly because we paid for a bunch of short-term debt that we had to refinance as bonds. We were supposed to sell more property, but we didn't sell as much property as was anticipated most quickly. 16 and 16, 17 and 18, I guess, were 340, 330. So you see the bond levels coming down, and that's a big impact of what we're able to do. Next. So debt service has opportunity costs. Obviously, if I'm paying, put money into debt, it doesn't let you do other things. So every $1 million in debt service is 8 firefighters. It staffs 1 mid-sized library for a year. It operates 3 recreation community centers. It's rental assistance for 416 families. It could be emergency shelter for 160 clients. It could be child care subsidies for 143 people. It's 1,274 county-funded maternity partnership program clients. It prunes 2,100 trees, and it provides renovations for 91 bus stops. So these are things you would do for every $1 million that you don't spend on debt service. On the other hand, this is the other side of the trade-off. $20 million in debt service constructs 1 elementary school addition, builds 4 high school wellness centers, does 4 library refreshes in the county, replaces 14 fire stations, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. We built 7 new long span bridges, those bridges you need in your communities that have to be replaced. Resurfaces 95 lane miles of residential roadway. That's just the 20 million. And it provides almost 500,000 feet of curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So those are the kind of things you have to balance. Am I putting the money into operations, or am I putting money into capital projects like these? Next. So the capital budget challenge is there are great needs. The school budget vastly has exceeded this year their request for capital projects by hundreds of millions of dollars. What we had just budgeted the previous year. This is over 6 years. Inflation has been brutal. And, we see it on construction projects. Everybody sees it in labor. We're seeing it internally. We have a large number of vacancies. People will no longer work for what they used to work for, not just in county government, but it's in the private sector too. So we're not experiencing anything anybody else has. We have volatile revenues for CIP funding sources, such as impact taxes and recordation taxes. And, we started going into this budget season pretty optimistic because we were pretty certain that property tax and income taxes would move in a positive direction. We had no idea that the Federal Reserve would destroy the economy and the housing market. And so we took an enormous hit. When people stopped buying and selling homes, we took an enormous hit on recordation taxes and transfer taxes, impact. And then we took a hit on impact taxes because the council chose to give money to developers that we normally would have collected for schools and transportation projects. And so there's a chunk of money out of this budget for that. So a number of things have happened that have reduced our flexibility. And then we have other limited resources. The county can only, we can play with the recordation and impact taxes. We're at the top of the income tax. So we can't, I said that recordation taxes. We can't touch income taxes. So we're at 3.2%. That's as high as the state allows us to go. So there's no room there to change anything, and we're left with property taxes. And the deal in Maryland that is very unfortunate is residential and commercial property taxes are tied together. So you cannot raise commercial taxes without raising residential taxes. Why does this matter? Washington, D.C. We compete with their residential property tax is 85 cents. They're the lowest tax district if you include all taxes, lowest tax district in the DC area. Montgomery County is the second lowest tax district in the DC area. Seriously, the second lowest. DC's property tax for commercial property is $1.85. So instead of 85 cents, they're collecting $1.85 on commercial property and able to pump a ton of money into their overall budget because of the revenues they collect on commercial property. We're at 99 cents on residential and 99 cents on commercial. It's a big difference. You want to compare it to Northern Virginia? I'll get to a slide that does this comprehensively. But the shorthand with us versus Fairfax is 99 cents versus $1.11 on residential. On commercial property, $1.11 base tax, 12.5 cents transportation tax. And if you're in a special taxing district like Tyson's Corner, you add about 40 cents to that. If you're Potomac Yards, you add about 30 cents to that. So Fairfax County taxes commercial property far higher than. So those of you who are envious of Fairfax County, keep in mind that the development community over there, over a dozen years ago, went to the state legislature with the council and said, give the council the ability to raise commercial taxes separate from residential taxes, because we can't build the infrastructure we need to grow our businesses if there's not more money. And there's no way you're going to do that by a tax on the general population. And the businesses did that because it made their property more valuable. The Silver Line immensely increased the value, for example, of Tyson's Corner. That decision by the business community and the council to raise taxes on commercial property made it possible for Fairfax to build the things that we can only talk about. If you ever wonder, people, remember David Blair during the campaign would always say, we're a rich county. I don't understand why we can't do things. Well, if I was a rich county and I had Fairfax County's tax on commercial, I would do everything they do. If I had a $1.11 tax and all that other commercial money, I would be able to do a lot more things. We would be able to do a lot more things. But we are the lowest tax jurisdiction on commercial property in the entire DC region. So when you hear people complain about, oh, the commercial taxes in Montgomery County are high, they are not high. They are lower than any place else in the DC region. And that's not my numbers. That's from a study that DC does every 2 years for residential property and every year for commercial property, because DC has been trying to place itself competitively against the other jurisdictions. They use that as their benchmark of figuring out where they sit. All we had to do was take Montgomery County's numbers and use us as the comparator instead of using DC as a comparator. But there's more we'll show. Go ahead. So we had one-time operating revenues in FY23 and FY24 that we directed to the capital budget. We got $357 million from the state for the Build to Learn for MCPS school construction. That's going to be exhausted by FY27. So imagine what we'd be doing now if we didn't have the state money that's coming in for the next few years. The county exceeded the 10% operating reserve. For all the years I was on the council, the target in this county was 10%. The county never got to 10%. My second year, we hit 10%. We ended last year at 14% reserves. So in case anybody thinks that we've been spending money like drunken sailors, we're not doing that. We've done a job of trying to marshal as much of our money and make it available to reinvest in the community. And we expect increases in state and federal transportation funding, and we've been able to maintain our AAA bond rating. And if you read the bond rating agency comments about us, they feel that this place is a pretty well-run, well-managed jurisdiction. So we were going along doing our budget, minding our own business, and we thought we'd do a budget that didn't need to be a tax increase. And then the school system sent their budget across the street. They asked for an increase in spending of $300 million over last year. $300 million. The highest they'd ever gotten over a previous year was $110 million. So $300 million is not sustainable. It's not even, wasn't even doable. $75 million comes from the state, and the other 222 or 225 winds up coming from the 10-cent tax increase. There was no way to fund the school budget without cutting $222 million of that $1.2 billion number I showed you. So I would have had to cut, what, 1/6 of the rest of the budget, and assuming that you're not cutting fire and police, probably 1/3 of everything else in order to make room for the school budget. That's not sustainable. So a rational person would ask, is the school budget request reasonable. And I reached the conclusion that it probably was. Of the increase, they asked for about almost 3/4 of it is salary increases for Montgomery County teachers. Why is that important? 12 years ago, back when Montgomery County was probably putting more money into schools than anybody else, teacher pay kind of plateaued. We hit a recession, and county made serious adjustments. We got permission to not meet the maintenance of effort. We dropped the school budget, and we never recovered from dropping the school budget because of the recession. So we did not go back up where we were before. Teachers' pay is no longer at the top of the region. They're not the top in the state of Maryland. And we're not competitive because we're the most expensive place to live without the higher teacher pay. And that's a problem because when you're recruiting somebody to come live in Montgomery County and teach in Montgomery County, if you can't afford to live in Montgomery County, you might look at another jurisdiction. And that's been a real problem for us. So the school system still is not recovered, still has hundreds of vacancies. And their situation just got worse because DC just raised starting teacher pay to $75,000 a year. Starting teacher pay in Montgomery County is $53,000 a year. $53,000 won't even qualify you for Montgomery County's famous MPDU program, moderately priced dwelling units. You make too little money to afford a moderately priced dwelling unit in Montgomery County, which when it was created in 1974 was meant to serve teachers, firefighters, and police officers. That's what they said in 1975. Well, not so much teachers then. So we are way underpaying our teaching staff. And what's going to get really worse for everybody, and worse for us, is with Kerwin in 2027, all jurisdictions will have the same starting pay. It will be $60,000 a year. This budget increase doesn't get us to 60. We'd probably get there next year. If all jurisdictions start somebody at $60,000 a year, and you can take your $60,000 and make it on the Eastern Shore next to the beach, or make it in the mountains, or make it any place in the state of Maryland, if the cost of living is a fraction of what the cost of living is here, how well do you think we're going to compete for teacher talent? I could be on the beach, teach 10 months a year, go to the beach every day on my vacation, or I can be in Montgomery County, work in the summer so I can pay my rent. This is a real challenge, and the county's going to face that. Some counties it's going to be a bigger problem than others, and most people feel the county has to be above 60. Because if we're the same as everybody else, we will lose the competition for teachers. And I think that's a real threat to our schools. So I would tell people that, if you had a $500,000 house, the tax increase will cost you $500. If the reputation of Montgomery County schools slips to the point that people perceive this is not the place you want to come, or businesses say this is not the school system we want to be in, the hit on your home values will dwarf that. And I'm living evidence that I live in Tacoma Park. I lived in Tacoma Park when Carroll Avenue was the dividing line between Montgomery County and Prince George's County. The value of the same house on the other side of that street was tens of thousands of dollars less than the house in Montgomery County. Why? Air was the same, roads the same, still in the city of Tacoma Park, all the services the same. One difference between our side of the street and the other side of the street was Prince George's County school system with Montgomery County school system. So if you don't think the value of schools matters, value of the school matters a ton to our property values. And so we can't afford to continue to glide down the path of not making the investments that other jurisdictions are making. Next slide. So this is what I referenced earlier. You can see in 2010, we were spending, adjusted for inflation, almost $16,000 per pupil. Today, almost $13,000 a pupil. That's a real decline. When you add in the state money, the difference is still about $3,000, which is what we were spending then and what we're spending now. That is not the track you're going to be on. So anybody who says, why aren't schools like they used to be? Well, we're not spending money like we used to spend for our kids. And it makes a difference. Next. This compares us to other fund jurisdictions. That's Howard County. That's what they spend per pupil. And then Baltimore County, what they spend per pupil. Baltimore City is higher than us, and Arundel is higher than us. So look at that little blue dot on the right-hand side. With this tax increase, we become yellow. So we're still not spending as much as other people. We just wind up spending more than we're spending now. But I want to give you a context because you got to understand what it's like to be in other jurisdictions and how we compare. And other people will be looking at this as well. Next. So the main purpose of this money is to recruit staff, and not just teachers, but other essential staff. It's to be competitive in salaries with neighboring jurisdictions, except the District of Columbia, which I'm not ever going to propose trying to close that $15,000 gap in one fell swoop. Because of the increase in special education enrollment, the need to find more special education teachers, a rare commodity on a good day. We need more, be able to provide more students with teaching assistants. The school's making a big investment in tutors to help kids get through this horrible 2 years or 3 years of COVID and its impact on education. And they're trying to improve school performance. If you look at the 2022 Comprehensive Assessment Program test results, only 31% of MCPS students were proficient in math and 53% were proficient in English. This is not the MCPS that we all know. And we can't leave this to be the MCPS that goes forward. Next. This is a little chart about tax burden. As you can see, the chart on the right, it's 3 different charts, 3 different income levels. The circled jurisdiction at the bottom is Washington, D.C. This is Washington. This is the chart that D.C. produces. The county right above the District of Columbia is Montgomery County. And everybody else is higher than this. Everybody else. And you can see it on the state of Maryland. We are a yellow county in terms of tax burden. The light blue, medium blue, and dark blue are all places that have heavier tax burdens in the state of Maryland today. We rank about 11th in the state of Maryland today in terms of tax burden. And if we pass this increase, we'll be the 6th highest instead of the 11th highest. So we're not taking us into a place that nobody else is. If you were going to tell me, because I had some reporters say, well, people are going to move to Howard County, get away from their high taxes. I said, that's nice. Their tax rate's $1.25. How's that going to work? You can go to Virginia, their tax rate's $1.11, plus everything else. So I'm not happy about having to present this. It's not what I set out to do, but it's a real dilemma whether you decide you're going to let the schools continue to fester, whether you're willing to make major cuts in county services to pay for the schools, or are we willing to tax ourselves? And hopefully this will prompt a discussion about moving to a tax system generally that's more like Northern Virginia's, where the private sector contributes more money to the overall tax base so we can do some of these things. And again, I'll say, if you like Northern Virginia and you like what they're able to build, think about how they get the money. And it's different than us. So you want to be like that. I have no pride in authorship. I'm perfectly happy to steal ideas from other people. But if this is what's made them successful, we ought to think really hard. We ought to be looking at a similar policy. Next. And this shows the commercial tax burden. And in this chart, you can see, and again, they ran 2 different scenarios, 2 different size companies. Both cases, Montgomery County is the cheapest jurisdiction to do business in. Somebody's going to tell you that there's a lower tax in Virginia on property taxes, it's no income taxes from the state. That's true. But Fairfax County has something called the BPOL, which is a 3% tax on all commercial receipts. So if you're a retired accountant working part-time, you pay 3% of your income to Virginia. If you're a big business and you're making a ton of money, you're paying 3% of your gross receipts to the state, to the county, actually. Fairfax County has an extra penny on their tax rate from Virginia, 0.7 of a cent on the sales tax goes to Virginia to build transportation projects. I'd like to have that. I don't have any of that. So these are the constraints we work in. But I kind of want to give you a sense of where we stand vis-a-vis other people. That may not make you like the idea of a tax increase any more or any less, but at least understand how we stand in a competitive setting against other jurisdictions and what it means to have the resources, to have these extra resources, and what it could mean not to have these extra resources. Next. So you guys get to good breakout sessions. Before you do that, I'll take some questions. If anybody's got a question, you get to talk about what you want to see in a capital budget. And we'll work very hard to squeeze as much juice out of this lemon as we can so we can fund as many things as we possibly can.
Okay.
No, Rich, the 265 or 95,000 that the MCTS wants.
Million.
Million,
Hundred.
I'm sorry.
100
Yes.
million.
Does that roll into the base so that you have to, or for the subsequent years, you have to meet that open so that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, once you raise the salaries, this is going to take salaries, that starting salaries to 58 or 59. If there's somebody from the school system, they can refine that. But that was the number I heard. They will not get it to 60. And once it's there, it's every year. But that also means the tax will be there, so you don't need to go at this again. I will say if we could adjust some of these other taxes, if we could get into OPEB and take a couple of cents out of OPEB, we could take $40 million out of the $800 million on an annual basis, remembering that interest and dividends replenish that fund. We could lower this. And that's my goal is, there's a need to do this now, but hopefully this opens up a discussion about how we can recalibrate how we tax people so it's less onerous moving forward.
Just the fact that we have the lowest commercial tax rate, doesn't that attract more businesses? I mean, I don't know a lot about this.
So no,
There must be some benefit to that in terms of the county, but maybe not.
So that is a logical thing, and it's a troubling thing actually. But I will say that low taxes are not the primary reason businesses locate places. When Amazon, we outbid it, for example, we outbid Virginia for Amazon. Virginia offered major improvements to George Mason and I guess I never get the Virginia score right. Virginia, NVA, whatever it is. They promised them investments in education to provide a talent pool. We offered them more money. They took the education investment in education and the talent pool. If cheap taxes were the secret of economic success, the Confederacy would lead the country in economic development. It obviously does not, and that's the least educated population in the country. What's hurting Montgomery County, and I'll be blunt about this, there have been report after report that says transportation is a major factor in locating people places. I proposed doing bus rapid transit 16 years ago. Toronto built a network like I proposed in 3 years. We haven't done a single decent, proper bus rapid transit line since then because we can never find the money to do it. Meanwhile, Virginia finds the money to build the Silver Line. They got some state help, but they put money in it. And that's our problem. We've not built infrastructure in this county. So our lunch gets eaten by other people. I talked to one of the supervisors, and you all dealt with master plans. Some of you have before. And what they told me was the difference between Montgomery County and Fairfax County. If we say in Fairfax County that they're going to build this transit system is going to open, that's going to be delivered, And the money you give us is going to go to build that transit system. They deliver. In Montgomery County, what's the purple line going to open? Got any idea? No, because I can't tell you when anything's going to happen here because I don't know what the revenue stream is going to be to make it possible to happen. And that is a real impediment to economic development. And it's one of the other differences is their tax is property tax. It goes to build only the transportation or other amenities that the tax is meant to provide. So if you're in Bethesda, the taxes go to build an infrastructure that's going to make Bethesda more attractive. Because Montgomery County doesn't do that, we have this thing called an impact tax. So a developer, one at a time, imagine you all were different properties in Bethesda, and one person at one table is ready to build. So when Peter's ready to build, I tax him. It's not enough money to build the system, so it goes into a fund. Someday, when there's enough money in that fund, we tap it out to build a project someplace in Montgomery County. In Virginia, they get taxed, but they know what they're getting for the tax. They're getting something delivered to their doorstep that improves the value of their property and makes them more successful. I want to imitate Virginia. And if we could do that, we could compete with them better.
Back to the please use the rationale as to why you.
It's a philosophical disagreement. The charter says the money was meant to pay all or some of retirement expenses. People on the council, and this is bizarre because when I was on the council and Mike was executive, I forget how many times we hit OPEB through balanced budgets, but we used to rate OPEB regularly. Now they don't want to touch them. In fact, they wanted me to take the surplus and add money to this the council. There is no rational reason for that. The only explanation we ever got was that someday you get enough money in OPEB that the interest on the OPEB account would pay the annual OPEB expense. Someday. So in the meantime, every year, if they don't get enough interest and dividends on what's in OPEB, then taxpayers add to OPEB. That's how 800 million got in there. And then you also are paying the employees' retirement. So this is philosophy. I think we should use the definition of the charter, not empty the account out, but take a certain base level of funding in there, leave it there, and then take the dividends and interest off it, and use that to contribute toward paying the OPEB and take a penny or two off the tax rate. That's what I would do with it. And, that would mean this could be an 8-cent tax increase instead of a 10-cent tax increase. This is philosophy. There is no magic to it. There is no law requiring us to do this. They made a mistake when they set it up. They think they treat it like a pension. It is not a pension.
Thank you, Bannon. Hi, good evening. So I have two questions. The first one is, I think you've given a compelling story to increasing taxes to support education. I grew up in Montgomery County. I went to Sherwood High School. I don't really recognize our county in many ways right now, as probably many of us don't. But I guess I'm wondering, have you done an analysis, financial analysis on like if we put more money, X number of dollars more into schools, then that would help relieve some of the money we're putting into like the Department of Social Workers or
Yeah.
other areas.
But this is the fundamental question. And I'll just say, unfortunately, the county is not allowed to have any say over any school program, period. I can't evaluate it. I can't not fund it. They're guaranteed last year's expenses plus inflation and growth in population. And every county executive in the state is a little bit tired of this. I mean, I'll be blunt, I've supported when I was a council member and everybody else did, maintenance of effort. And there was always above maintenance of effort because we were closing the achievement gap. We are like 20 years of closing the achievement gap and they ain't closed, right? And the programs that we fund When they're no longer running, there are no savings returned to the budget. I mean, I would expect if the school system says, these are the new things we're going to do, that some of the money comes from the old things you're not going to do anymore because they didn't work. That hasn't happened. So we're going to put a precedent that the county council feels the same way at the state level to give the county governments more oversight over the school budgets and to have more accountability measures about where the money goes and how it gets spent. I do think maintenance efforts are an important thing to have, but literally they would not be allowed to save money. If they came back tomorrow and said, we found ways to save $40 million of the budget, under state law, they'd be required to spend $40 million anyway. So we need to make some changes in this, and I'm happy to work on it. I was frustrated as a teacher. I'm frustrated as a council member, and I'm frustrated as a county executive.
And then the second question is, so I live in Hampshire Greens, and today I had lunch near my office, which is North Bethesda. So I had lunch in Pike and Rose. When can we get a Pike and Rose type area on this side of the county and build up this side, like town centers or just something like nicer grocery stores?
So since I've come in, we've expedited the development in Burtonsville. That's actually going to happen now. We liberated the town center development right off of 29, where they're going to put a grocery store and all that. And we got the project loose at the gateway to New Hampshire Avenue. So those three big things are happening. You're getting Montgomery College over here. That should help as well. There was a meeting today. We know there's a developer interested in the biggest eyesore in the county, which is Viva White Oak. Just a sand and gravel pit that nothing has happened on for how long? Long time. So there was apparently a productive meeting today. There's a developer who's interested. The developer's credible. He does really good stuff. If that deal goes through, you may get that large tranche of property developed the way everybody envisioned it. And so I'm optimistic. I've told them that I'll meet with the developer any day he wants to sit down and meet, because this is the first good news we've had from there since I was on the council. So we'll do everything we can do. If this developer wants to go forward, we'll make sure we do everything we need to do to help make that easier.
Hello, Mr. County Executive. On behalf of Councilmember Mink, I just wanted to thank you for one thing, and then I had a question. We wanted to thank you for your recommended CIP for FY24 for the priority that you put into the school system, and particularly the school projects in District 5. Many neighborhoods in this area have been fighting for new school projects for a decade, and it looks like maybe this might be the year that we finally nail Burtonsville Elementary School amongst other priorities. So thank you for that. I also wanted to ask, going forward, as we talk about FY25 and beyond in the CIP, we're still looking at a really big gap that's going to put a lot of stress on everything. And I don't know if you mentioned this earlier in your presentation, but I wanted to get your take on the importance of the recreation tax in the CIP discussion.
So there are a number of ways to address this. The council, like I said, reduced the taxes for developers because they were building on the metro. I want to point out that if a development, we had this happen in the county, developer gets approval for more density. I actually vote for this. Tall buildings on top of the metro, and they said they needed the height because it was more expensive to develop there. No sooner did they get the approval of parking planning and the county's approval, they turned around and said, we can't do this development unless you take away our taxes for 15 years. And the council did. They should have known that they couldn't afford to build the project on the metro for the price they paid for the land. And this is a game that goes on all the time. People buy property and then come and say, oh, I can't meet the requirements because they're too much. But the requirements are requirements. And the person doing your appraisals should be factoring in what the requirements are when they're saying you have to build You know, if you're gonna have to build 15% affordable housing, then you should do that. But the council did that. The easiest thing to do would be to reverse it and stop the giveaway, particularly since WMATA no longer can charge the highest and best price for property on retrofits for housing. So we can get the prices lower, which would help developers make it more affordable. But I think replacing what they did, undoing the damage, is important because we need to do that. Also, my budget proposed a $300 million a year average instead of $280 a year average. That would have put another 120 million in, which would have solved most of the gap between the school construction. And I still think, you know, I think you should do what you're doing. This is the right thing to do, and everybody else shouldn't be forced to pay for it. But I think it made sense to borrow the money because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the question I think everybody's got to ask. Got to ask yourselves this. Is the most important thing in this county the quality of life and how you feel about living here? Or is the most important thing the tax rate? And do you not care what happens to your quality of life if the tax rate doesn't support what you want? Or are you willing to pay for things that make you want to live here, that make it easier for you to sell your home when the day comes you want to sell your home? And from, you know, from my perspective as elected official, my job is to try to build the best county I can build. I know that if this tax doesn't go through and we do not fund the schools, the outcome will not be good. And you will not be happy with what happens to the perception of the county. So it's a choice everybody has to make. And I've said this, and I know it infuriates some of the people who aren't fond of me, but the truth is, like, there's no civilization in history that's known for its tax rate. None. Every civilization is known for what it builds and what it does, good or bad. You don't remember anybody because they lowered the taxes on the peasants. That's not the way the world works. And, you know, I think we're at one of those points. You've got to decide what it's worth to live in the county, and what kind of county you want to live in. I know what I want to do. And we'll find out what everyone else wants to live in when we get through this budget process. I'm going to turn this back over. I'm going to go and leave you to your tables and your discussions. But look, thank you all very much for indulging tonight. And I hope it gives you a better idea of what we're dealing with. And if, you know, you're supportive of what I'm saying, please let the council know that the county's worth it. I think it's worth it. I know a lot of people think it's worth it, but this really is a fundamental decision. We walk back, it's going to be hard to get caught up in it. To hold just it's deep. So thank you all very much.
Thanks to the county executive. Thank you, Mark. So please, let's just make sure that we get this message to your neighbors, to your friends, to your networks, get the information out there. And so for some of you who are at home and online, this will be out sessions in the 4 areas, then have a 2-minute report out, and then we'll adjourn hopefully by 9 o'clock. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So what we have here are 4 tables. We have table 1, the education, which is in the back there, where we have Sebastian and Rodriguez. They are the recorders and the facilitators. Table 2, which is the environment. The education, we have, I'm sorry, table 1, education, Maggie and Roberta will help facilitate.